This is a really easy, beginner-friendly quilt that you can make in less than a day. Hello friends, welcome back to Karla Created. My name is Karla, and if you are new here, I love sewing. And if you do too, well then you might want to stick around. In this video, I am going to be making an easy quilt. I am making this super easy quilt entirely out of fabrics from my stash. I have spent some time going through my fabric stash and picking out these lovely fabrics. Now, one of them I've had for a very, very long time. It has a very large floral print, and I have been debating what to do with this fabric for so long. I have almost put it into previous quilts, but they all required me to cut up the beautiful floral print into two smaller pieces, and it just wasn't, it was never going to work. So I've decided to use it to make a really large block, so then you can really see how pretty those big flowers are. I have got a 12.5-inch ruler, so that is the size of the block that I'm going to make. Now, the second fabric that I have chosen is this beautiful tiny little flower floral print. It's a little bit busy, but to be honest, I didn't have any other fabric in my stash that matched with that beautiful big floral print fabric apart from this one. So we're running with it. We're going to see what it turns out like. And I've also picked out this beautiful green linen, which I actually used in one of my previous projects, and I had a little bit of scrap left over. So I'm going to use up some of that, and I may also use a burgundy if I don't have enough of the green, but we will see. Okay, so that's the fabrics. Let's get stuck into putting this quilt together, and I'll show you how quick and easy it is. Now, I'm making a lap quilt that will finish at 48 by 60 inches. If you want to make this quilt bigger, you just make more blocks, because we're only making one type of block for the whole quilt, which is why it is so easy. Now, to start making this quilt, all you need to do is cut out the required number of blocks that you want in your fabrics that you've chosen. I have chosen these two, so I'm going to cut out 10 in the larger floral print and then 10 in the smaller floral print. You will also need to cut out some smaller squares. I'm cutting 4.5-inch squares, and you'll need double the amount of smaller squares relative to your bigger colored squares. These smaller squares end up being the corners of your blocks. Okay, so I thought that I would have enough of the green for the corner triangles. Sadly, I do not have enough, and I've thought of a few ideas to try and maybe scrounge up enough green fabric, but this is literally all I have left after cutting these 4.5-inch squares. And I just don't have the brain power to try and figure out how I can make the green work across the whole quilt. And instead, I'm going to cut up 4.5-inch squares out of this maroony burgundy, it's more like a maroon, I think, fabric. And I'm going to pair that with this lovely small floral print, only because the maroon pulls on the lovely red and maroon flowers, and I think there's a bit more green in the bigger block that's more noticeable, which would look nicely with the green in the corners. So that's the plan. Hasn't taken me that long to cut everything out thus far. Now, there is a little bit of sort of wastage with this quilt, because you cut out squares, then you stitch them on, and then you cut on the diagonal, and you've got like little triangles that are wasted. However, I do not throw anything away. I will keep those. I might even stitch the two color triangles together, which would be very Christmas. But then I've got some half square triangles already made for a future project, potentially. We will see. Or I'll just keep them and start creating a collection of HSDs. Okay, let's do it. Once you have finished cutting out all of your required fabrics, the next thing that you need to do is draw a diagonal line from corner to corner on your smaller sized blocks. What this does is provide you with a sewing line, and you'll sew along this line when attaching these smaller squares to your larger squares to form your finished block. You'll need to place
a smaller square on each opposite corner of your bigger square, as you see here.
Okay, so you've just seen me assemble all of the blocks, and now I am just trimming off these stitch and flip corners so that we can iron them all flat, and the block will end up looking like this. Isn't that fabric absolutely gorgeous? Oh my god, I'm so excited. Okay, so excited. This is why sometimes you just need to do an easy quilt, because it comes together fast. It's exciting because it comes together so fast. You don't have that like delayed gratification like you do with other more complicated quilts and complicated quilt blocks. Now, I already mentioned that I'm making these blocks 12.5 inches, and I'm not actually following a pattern for how to do this stitch and flip. I've seen Fabric Cafe share this particular quilt, and they do sell a pattern, so I will link their website in the description if you want to go and actually buy a proper pattern. I don't know what their pattern is. I don't have their pattern, but I've seen this technique that they've shared, and I thought, well, I'm just going to give it a red hot go. And I figured that you can actually do any size of triangle on the corner. It just depends on the size of the square that you sew on. So if you wanted a slightly bigger colored corner, you then just do a bigger square and then stitch and flip. Anyway, enough of me rambling. I'm going to cut the rest of these corners off. Then I'm going to iron all of these flat, and then I'll lay out the quilt.
This is the layout that I have chosen to use with this combination of fabrics. However, this quilt block is quite versatile in that you can mix it up to create a completely different look. Just by reorienting the blocks, you actually get this additional square in the middle. I think this is really cool, but I'm going to stick with my original design. All that's left to do now is to stitch together all of the blocks to create the finished quilt top. Then I need to create the quilt sandwich. However, I'm going to be a little bit different and use this old fleecy blanket that already lives in my lounge room as the quilt wadding, but also the backing. This is probably very unconventional, but I figured I would give it a go, given that I have this pink blanket and it's kind of plain and boring as it is, so I wanted to jazz it up. Now, I did a really simple quilting design on this quilt, just a simple diagonal, across the block method, and then also did a really narrow binding and top stitched it down with my machine. I would normally stitch my binding on by hand, but I wanted this to be really quick and easy and satisfying, which it absolutely was. I encourage you to give this a go if you want a quick and easy, satisfying quilt project.
This was by far the easiest quilt that I have ever made, and I'm so happy with how it turned out. I'm also really, really glad that I got through some of my fabric in my stash. I am determined to reduce my stash by the end of this year as much as I humanly can. Let me know what you think of my super easy quilt in the comments, and if you enjoyed this video, please give it the thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you love sewing as much as I do. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next video. Bye.